let's get the other half of the spew done with our college football. All right, so talking college football. Last week in college football was the final week of the regular season for college football for almost all of the teams in Division I NCAA football, with the exception of a small few here and there. And then not counting, obviously, or counting, I should say, as something separate, would be the conference championships that are being held this week. Now, for my Gopher fans, quick, we'll close them out, and then we'll get to all the real stuff going on with the top four scenario for the playoffs and the championship. But the Gophers, in their final game of the season, lost to Wisconsin. The border battle, it's like I said, it was somewhere between our 12th, 13th, or 14th loss in a row to them. They keep the axe. We finished the season 5-7. It is, however, there are strong rumblings that we will get an invite, in fact, with our 5-7 record, even though our only two conference wins came over like a 2-6 and 1-7 team or something like that, like just garbage. We have no quality wins. But whatever, you need 80 teams for 40 bowl games, and you end up with some 5-7 garbage ones like the Gophers in there. But tough season with everything that went through. Injuries primarily is the reason for their lack of wins, as well as, my thoughts on how competent and capable Coach Jerry Kill was as a coach. Not very. I do like Clays as the new head coach. The news there is that he decided that at the end of this season, they going into next year, they would not be bringing back their offensive coordinator or their quarterbacks coach, who he has coached with under Clays for many, many, many years. Said that he just, wants to go a different direction, has a different vision, his own vision for the team, and wants to bring people in that fit that. And these guys don't, and boom. And I love that. I think that's totally right, because our offense has been terrible for the last several years. We've been able to run the ball well from time to time, and Leidner, once Kill was finally gone, which I said Kill is killing Leidner, that's the reason Leidner's not playing well. It's not that Leidner stinks, it's that Kill stinks. Boom. This season we get Kill out of there, and all of a sudden Leidner's throwing for 300 yards in multiple games and looking like a very good, competent, quarterback potentially, given that he continues to grow and develop. But so I loved those moves. I loved him, not letting personal relationships cloud his better judgment, and just taking a stand. And, I wish Clays nothing but the best of luck moving forward. All right, now recapping the results from last week's game and getting you set up for this Saturday's games, final set of, regular season conference championship games before it is all bowls and playoffs, air quotations. So on Friday night last week, we had, in what was a very important Big Ten game, 4th-ranked Iowa held off unranked Nebraska in Nebraska by a score of 28-20 to remain undefeated and ranked in that number 4 spot for that 4th and final playoff bid. Baylor versus TCU, which was a huge game, pointed out to you tons of complications, ramifications. Well, TCU and Baylor made it easy on everybody, with TCU beating Baylor by a score of 28-21, thus making the winner of the Oklahoma State game the winner of the Big 12 Conference, and likely, especially if it was Oklahoma, guaranteed a playoff, one of the 4 playoff berths. Then, in what I also said was going to be a huge game, we had inexplicably unranked Houston versus one-loss 15th-ranked Navy. And I told you, this game, this is a big game. Houston crushed Navy 52-31. I believe knocking Navy out of the top 25 and putting Houston into the top 25. Again, called it. And then we had Oregon beating the Beavers, the Oregon State Beavers, 52-42 in the battle for Oregon. And then we had 20th-ranked Washington State Again, these are all end of the, last week of the season in-state rivalries or, in-conference border rivalries. Washington State, 20th ranked, gets crushed by Washington, unranked Washington, 45-10. And then 24th ranked Toledo loses to unranked Western Michigan, 35-30. So, every game there, whether it was an upset or not, it was either an upset or a very close or high-scoring game, or some combination of all three of those things. So Friday's college football this last week was about as good as it gets for a Friday. Then moving on to Saturday, we had number 1 ranked Clemson holding off South Carolina 37-32. Second ranked Alabama handles Auburn, unranked Auburn 29-13. In the battle for the Big 12 championship, basically, since they don't have an official championship, Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State mightily 58-23, locking Oklahoma in as no worse than the 3 seed in the playoffs. They are the one and only team in college football right now that is guaranteed a Final Four spot because they've won their conference, they only have 1 loss, and they have no more games to play. So Oklahoma is guaranteed one of the 4 playoff spots for the championship. They have already clinched that. And I'm pretty darn sure, I'm going to dig them up here before next week, I promise you, because I know where these are actually. But I'm pretty darn sure that I picked Oklahoma to win the Big 12 and be one of the Final Four teams in the playoffs when I did my college football predictions. Yeah, pretty sure. Wow. And they didn't start out inside the top 20, I want to say, at the start of the season rankings. They were somewhere around like 16, But anyway, enough patting myself on the back. Moving on, Michigan State, 5th ranked, crushes unranked Penn State, who is actually a very good team, underrated, underappreciated, 55-16. Stanford beats Notre Dame and really, one could say, complicates some of the scenarios. But in the likely scenarios, what they did is clear things up. Now Notre Dame is an independent, doesn't need to be considered. Should the other things, should the normal things hold true. But we'll get to that in just a moment when we get to the upcoming games. But so yeah, undefeated, I want to say. At the time, Notre Dame loses by 2 or no, they had only lost 1 game. Notre Dame had lost 1 game. They were ranked 4th or 5th. Or no, they were ranked... I think these are last week's rankings here that I'm looking at. Yeah, they have to be. So we've got 6th ranked Notre Dame at the time playing 9th ranked Stanford. Stanford wins by 2, 38-36. Then we have Ohio State, 8th ranked, crushing 10th ranked Michigan, 42-13. Still a great year for Michigan, but boy, they really just, things kind of fell apart on them the last few weeks of the season. That Michigan State game just derailed that team as much as I've ever seen in sports, period. Then in the battle for Florida, we had 13th ranked Florida State beating 12th ranked Florida 27-2. And for some reason, Florida is the one that will be playing against Alabama this coming Saturday for the SEC title. I can only assume that is because Florida State is on some kind of sanctions, punishment, like they're banned from conference championship for 5 years for, recruitment infractions or something. Please, somebody look that up. Find out why the heck Florida State is not playing Alabama in the SEC championship and Florida is. Maybe it's because Florida State and Alabama are on the same half of, of the side or whatever. But, like the east or west, north, south, whatever. But it makes no sense because Florida State's clearly the second best SEC team and should be playing Alabama for that title, but they're not. Then we had North Carolina, 14th ranked, beating North Carolina State 45-13. Northwestern, 16th ranked, wins 24-14 over Illinois. Ole Miss, 18th ranked, beats 21st ranked Mississippi State 38-27. Ole Miss was the one team that was able to beat Alabama this season. Unranked USC crushes 22 ranked UCLA 40-21. Utah, 20th ranked, wins by 6 points over Colorado, and Temple, 25th ranked, wins easily. So those were all of your games from last week, or all your top 25 games from last week, and here are all of the significant games that we've got coming up for this week. It's a short list. Like I said, a lot of the season's done for most people, barring conference championships and this one inexplicable Big 12 rivalry game that would have allowed Baylor an argument, over Oklahoma, especially over Oklahoma State, should they have won their game. And Baylor won their game last week, but that was not the case. Baylor made it real simple for everybody. Now, Baylor is still 12th ranked, and they are hosting Texas. They are unranked. Baylor is a 20.5 point favorite. That game is at 11 o'clock in the morning, and yeah, Baylor should win that in a blowout, but you never know. Texas might make it close or even upset it. Baylor doesn't have a whole lot to play for anymore. So, state of mind and motivation in collegiate team sports to me is always more crucial of an element than in professional sports. That's their job. They shouldn't need to be a bunch of babies. Then also at 11 o'clock, we've got the battle for the American Athletic Conference, the AAC, not the ACC, but the AAC. And this is a great game between 22-ranked Temple at 10-2 and 19th ranked Houston at 11-1. Houston is a 6-point favorite. I think Houston's going to crush Temple. I think Houston is a really good team and deserves to be in a good bowl game this year. Then moving on to the 3 o'clock game on CBS, we've got 18th ranked, completely undeserving 10-2 Florida taking on second-ranked 11-1 Alabama. Alabama should crush Florida and cement their spot as either the 1 or 2 seed in the college football playoffs. Then at 6:45 Central Standard Time, we've got the Pac-12 Championship, which features the USC Trojans, 20th ranked, who have been up and down, very unpredictable, but when they're good, they can beat anybody, playing the now 7th ranked 10-2 Stanford team. Now, if Stanford can win this game and have a little bit of help with either Alabama losing, Iowa losing, or Clemson losing, they will have a chance to get in that Final Four. But they need to win and have one of those three that are still playing this week that are currently above them lose. But yeah, that's where they stand. But like I said, I don't know. Stanford is, Stanford's a 4.5 point favorite in that one. I'm actually picking USC to win that game. I don't know. I've seen Stanford look great this year. I've seen Stanford look, havable, mediocre. And like I said, if USC comes out and plays their A game, I think their A game beats Stanford's A game. Stanford just more consistently plays close to their A game than USC does this season, hence their records. I'm picking Stanford in the upset there, actually. And then we've got the Big 12 the Big 10 championship on Fox at 7 o'clock. Michigan State versus at 11-1 versus undefeated Iowa. Fifth ranked Michigan State versus 4th ranked Iowa. 11-1 versus 12-0. Michigan State is the favorite at 3.5 points. If Michigan State wins this game, they win the Big Ten, and they should be in the playoff. However, if Clemson and Alabama hold suit, and someone else, they really wouldn't. No, I think the winner of that game gets in no matter what. I think the winner of this Big Ten championship gets in no matter what. So, should be a great watch, high stakes there. And then, to me, this one is really spicy. We've got the ACC championship with the number 1 team, 12-0 undefeated, best in the land, Clemson Tigers, who've had a lot of close games the last several weeks, last month or so, taking on the super underrated, always NFL, draft-y, pumping, manufacturing, 10th ranked, 11-1 North Carolina Tar Heels. These North Carolina Tar Heels are for